Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman. We're back for another exciting week of sports banter. A lot of great football topics on the docket today. We'll talk about the biggest debate in college sports during the last week. Did the College Football Playoff Committee pick the right four teams? Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. Was undefeated Florida State robbed? How about a Georgia team that had been number one going into the SEC championship game? They've had 2 losses the last 3 years. A lot of great debate there. All that and more with the CFP talk, plus the NFL. After that statement went against the Eagles, are the 49ers the clear Super Bowl favorite? Is Brock Purdy a legitimate MVP favorite? And speaking of the NFL, speaking of the Eagles, how about that big Sunday night football game coming up this week? Philadelphia playing at Dallas. Big game. Could decide the NFC East. It's going to be awesome. Another great game. 2 talented teams coming off disappointing losses. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, Sunday afternoon, 3:25. Watch the Red Zone at noon. Watch the Chiefs and Bills at 3:25. And watch the Eagles and Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Now that I'm off Sundays from work, Tom, that sounds like my lineup. Can't wait to have that happen. We'll have our betting locks of the week, sports trivia, statements of the week, all that and more. Cannot wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic after a bit of a holiday hiatus. I hope everybody had an enjoyable Thanksgiving. And for those of you who celebrate Christmas, as you can see, got a couple of the decorations up and ready to go for the upcoming holiday season. But certainly not a very happy holiday season for the Florida State Seminoles, as they're going to be going up against Georgia, 2 teams that were, prior to championship weekend, in the college football playoff top 4 ranking. And after that weekend, find themselves out of it. Definitely, there's a lot of different ways to go on making the right decision. So, like Kamen, I have the benefit of seeing what you tweeted on, I believe it was Saturday after the game. So
yes.
We'll start with you on that opinion, because I'm going to be taking things in a bit of a different direction as far as this debate goes, as far as this conversation goes, simply because I've had enough time to kind of let the righteous indignation kind of like wear itself out. So I'm coming at this with a much more calm, level-headed take. But did the college football playoff get it right, in your opinion? Who would be your top 4 if you think anything should be different?
Yeah, first off, just real quick, not really much of a debate, but Michigan, undefeated, won the Big Ten. I'm all right with them being number 1. Washington, undefeated, won the Pac-12. They're number 2. That's fine with me. I'm all right with those 2. Tom, a lot of different things go into deciding what teams are in the top 4. There's resume, there's head-to-head, but there's one thing that I value far more than anything else, Tom, far more. I'm not saying it's the only thing that matters, but it is, to me, by far the most important thing that matters, and that is who are the best 4 teams. Not who was undefeated, not who had the best resume, not even who won the head-to-head matchups. I care about one thing and one thing far over everything else, and that is who are the 4 best teams. Florida State is not one of the 4 best teams, Tom. They played the 55th toughest schedule in college football. Alabama played the 5th toughest. If Alabama and Florida State played right now, Alabama would smoke them. And honestly, Tom, in my opinion, even if Jordan Travis were healthy, I would still pick Alabama. But what makes it, to me, a no-brainer is that Jordan Travis is out. Florida State had 3 points at halftime in the ACC title game. They had 16 the whole game against a Louisville team that did lose to Kentucky, by the way, out of the SEC, the same Kentucky team that Georgia clobbered. SEC conference that Georgia and Alabama went through with ease, not losing a single game in conference play. With that said, SEC toughest conference, obviously. ACC weakest conference. I know Florida State beat LSU. I know they did. The LSU team, the first half of the year versus the one at the second half of the year, not the same team. Their defense was never good, but the first half of the year was atrocious. I saw it in person against Mizzou. That team could not play a lick of defense. So I think Alabama had the tougher schedule. They had 4 top 25 teams. Florida State had 2 top 25 wins. ACC only had 3 other teams ranked in the top 25. Louisville, NC State, and Clemson. They didn't even play NC State, by the way, Florida State. So, look, it's as simple as this. If Bama and Florida State played today, right now, Alabama would win. By the way, Florida State, Tom, 14-point underdog against Georgia in their bowl game. 14-point underdog. It tells you what Vegas thinks of that game. It tells you who Vegas thinks is the better team in that game. So who you play has to matter. Like, I think of it, would Alabama be undefeated with their schedule if they had Florida State's schedule? Yes. I personally, Tom, for me, I don't even think Florida State's a top 7 team in the country. I think that Ohio State is better. I think that Oregon is better. I think that our alma mater, Mizzou, is better. I would put Florida State 8th in my college football playoff rankings if I'm going based on the best teams. Now, resume has to matter. We'd put them ahead of the alma mater, Mizzou, because Mizzou has 2 losses. But I don't think it's that close to me. Like, I'm not upset for Florida State. I get they're upset. And yeah, they did schedule LSU in the offseason. Did they do everything they can? Yeah. But sometimes life's not fair, Tom. That's life. I personally think that Georgia should be in the top 4 as well. That's my big controversy statement. I mean, Georgia was number 1. It's the first time ever that a team was number 1 going into the penultimate CFP rankings. For them to slip all the way to 6, that's wild. They lost by 3 points to Alabama. That's wild. And again, it's not the same Alabama team as earlier in the season. I'll talk a lot more about this during my statements of the week. But I think the non-conference games against the good teams, we ought to have 1 week, like the 3rd to last week, the 2nd to last week of the college football season, the last month of the season where we see a non-conference matchup. That way, these teams are encouraged to play the tough non-conference teams, but they don't have to play in week 1 or week 2. We see the same thing in the NFL. It takes a team a couple weeks to get going. I mean, Jalen Milroe is a first-year starting quarterback. I know he's had some experience. I know he's played in some games last year. Bryce Young was injured. But it's a whole different story to be the full-time guy for your first season. You learn by doing the Missouri method for journalism. So the fact that Texas beat Alabama week 2, that's not the same Jalen Milroe as the one we have now. I know everyone wants to put a stock in the head-to-head win. Well, Texas should be ahead of Alabama because they beat them head-to-head. But I look at it the whole season as a whole. You can't just base it on one head-to-head game, Tom. In my opinion, Alabama would beat Texas today. I would have put Bama 3, Georgia 4, or even Georgia 3, Bama 4. I'm okay with either one for me personally. But, like, who did Texas lose to? Oklahoma. Oklahoma's good. Don't get me wrong. Oklahoma's good. But who had the best losses of the one-loss team? It's Alabama and it's Georgia. They had the best losses. The best loss has to matter. Alabama had more good wins than Texas and a better loss than Texas had. Georgia had more good wins than almost all of these teams, except for maybe Bama, and they had the best loss to Alabama. So I want to put the 4 best teams in, which I think are Michigan, Washington, Georgia, Alabama. That's my 4 teams. I'd put Bama 3 because they just beat Georgia neutral field, Georgia 4. And then I would probably have to put Texas 5 on the outside looking in, and then 6, 7, Oregon, Ohio State, FSU, whichever way you want to put it. But that's what matters to me, Tom. The 4 best teams, Florida State, unequivocally to me, especially without its quarterback playing. Its 3rd-string quarterback They barely beat Louisville. I know the score didn't show it, but it was a close game the whole way. The Florida game was a close game the whole way. FSU, with its third string quarterback, with its backup quarterback, may not even be a top 10 team in the country. Maybe just
Yeah,
barely top 10.
I mean, probably. I mean, a lot of the people who are going to be proponents for Florida State will point to the fact that they have an amazing defense. And why are we saying that, offense is going to be valued more than defense in terms of the overall team makeup? And perhaps even point out things like look at Michigan and their passing statistics over the past 3 games compared to Florida State as far as offense versus defense, or hey, look at what Washington's defense. I think they're like the 94th best defense in college football. But I mean, I went back and forth on this one, and ultimately, I've come to the conclusion that in my mind, this conversation shouldn't even be about whether or not the CFP got it right or got it wrong, because you can come up with any number of arguments for or against. It's more about the CFP getting what they wanted. I mean, I'm not sure if you know this, but I used to be called Tom Reynolds Casselman, as in Reynolds tinfoil, for the hats that I sometimes would wear. Essentially, what we have going into this college football playoff is 2 future Big Ten teams in Michigan and Washington, and 2 future SEC teams, one established, of course, with Alabama, but then Texas next year is going to be in the SEC. Mm-hmm. This was about the College Football Playoff Committee, I think. Not that this is necessarily the only criterion, but they got what they wanted in terms of, hey, we want to keep you invested in making scheduling tough games against big time opponents for your non-conference schedule. Texas, Alabama certainly has that, to be sure. But there was no way that the College Football Committee was going to have this playoff without an SEC representative, because you could have gone something along the lines of, let's just say, Magic World, Georgia had won. It probably would have been Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State. No questions asked. Really no drama about all of this as far as that goes.
Probably.
It's a nice, tidy, clean package, but coming into this, then it's going to be, well, we want to put in the SEC champion, but we're going to choose the optics of having the team that is undefeated and winning in a, by all accounts, weaker conference in the ACC, as opposed to Texas, who beat Alabama in Alabama by 10 earlier on in the season. So really, it's just about the optics, and essentially saying that it's not just about what's happened this season. In my mind, it's about what's going to be happening and continuing to happen. Pac-12 is done after this season. It's now essentially we have 2 major conferences in the Big Ten and in the SEC, and we have 2 minor conferences, I feel, in the Big 12 and in the ACC. And in a way, I think this is the College Football Committee saying, yeah, we're going to value these 2 super conferences, and we're going to put in some potential like rivalry seeds for future years, as Washington and Michigan are going to be facing off against each other down the road, as Texas and Alabama could very well be divisional opponents and facing each other every single year in the SEC. I think of course, most of the focus is on what happened this year, but it really feels like a lot of stuff in future seasons plays into the decisions that the College Football Committee made. And really, to my mind, the reason why I'm not even touching on whether they got it right or got it wrong is because a lot of stuff doesn't make sense in what they did. You have Georgia, like you said, in the penultimate game. They're the number 1 team. A 3-point loss to Alabama changes that somehow. I mean, this is tongue in cheek, but if it's about the best teams, if it's about the talent, well, Georgia should still be number 1 in the country. The loss to Alabama should mean nothing, because it's not really about the results on the field and the record that you have. It's just about eye test. Do you look good enough? Really, I could sit here and say tongue in cheek, oh, it's a mistake, because it should be Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and I think Alabama, because those were the top 4 teams at the beginning of the season. And so, well, if those are the best teams on paper that we're looking at before the games even start, why should we care about the results of the game? What only matters is how talented these teams are going into this college football playoff. So anyway, this is basically just, in my mind, more about the College Football Playoff Committee getting what they wanted as far as the different matchups. It's less about the record on the field. I think it's even less about necessarily the talent because, like you said, Georgia, a 3-point loss to Alabama doesn't mean that they're a less talented team than they literally were heading into that one game. So it's frustrating to look at. I mean, the college football committee, they get what they want also in terms of media attention, people talking about it, because it's been the topic of conversation for how many days. We're recording on a Thursday. They put this out on a Sunday, and it's still the lead topic on our show. They got everything that they wanted out of this. It's just that FSU and Georgia caught a couple of strays in the process.
Yeah, and I think if Georgia had beaten Alabama, you're right, it would have been Michigan or Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State. There wouldn't have been any debate, and it would have been. I don't know. I guess now that I think of it, I was thinking in my head like maybe that's better for the committee since they don't get blasted, but maybe it's not because maybe that's what
I don't think
want.
they care if they get blasted.
They want the attention.
Any attention. This is class.
What is that
type
good
of thing? Any type of attention is good. Yeah.
Good. What's the saying, Tom? You're really good with the sayings.
I mean, there's
no such thing as bad business or bad attention. I can't.
Yeah, no such thing as bad press.
That's
any
what
attention
it is.
Good attention.
Yeah,
you could even go Oscar Wilde, where the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
You're retro.
That's where the college football committee finds themselves.
So real quick though, I want to add one thing because I had this written down as my original argument, and you get lost in the train of thought.
Sure.
I'll ask you one after this, but for those that don't think the SEC should be in it, for those that think the SEC, the committee's biased towards the SEC, like on some level, yeah, maybe they do care about the ratings, which maybe they should. It's their business. But I'll go beyond that, Tom, though. The SEC has won 13 of the last 17 national titles, 6 of 9 in the college football playoff format. And Nick, you could say, oh, that was last year. That doesn't matter. It does matter because the conference always wins. Not only have they won 6 of 9 and 13 of 17, there's been multiple years where it's been 2 SEC teams in the championship. By the way, the last few titles, Georgia, Bama, LSU, Georgia and Bama both playing in the national title game. I know the TCU run was a little bit of a fluke, but what happened when the SEC played a Big 12 team? Like you said, a lesser conference, Big 12, ACC. They clobbered TCU last year. And look at what happens all these years. You put the SEC in, you give them a 4 seed, they still make the championship. Did you see how Michigan reacted when they saw that play Alabama? They did not look happy. They were not celebrating, Tom. They would have much rather seen Florida State on that like CFP graphic. Like that tells you enough. That tells you enough right there. I don't even like. I get it. I agree with you. It is better for ratings to put the SEC teams, but I think the SEC is the best. If you are winning almost every single season, you're winning the national championship almost every single season. How could you not be, in the top 4? The SEC champion, like it should be like an automatic bid. Like you have the conference championships in college.
And it's going to be.
No, it is. It's going to be
next year when they go to 12.
No, I know. I agree.
I think 12 is also a mistake, though.
What's a mistake? 12?
I think 12 is a mistake. I think 8 and no more because
someone's always going to be mad. I'm okay with the 12 personally. Give a few more teams off. That's where you'll get your like Tulanes and your lower group of 5 teams. That's how they'll get in for sure.
Yeah. And
you can't gripe too much that they got in instead of one of the big dogs. That's why I'm more.
It's one of those things where it's like I like 8 because it's a nice, clean playoff format number. You don't have this thing with like, oh, there's buys. You got some guys playing, 15 games, 16 games type of thing. Like
prepare them for the NFL. Look, the buys are fair though. You get one of the top 4 seeds, you should get a buy, Tom. I was like you. I was on the 8. I have kind of warmed up to the 12. Maybe it's because our alma mater, Mizzou, would make it with 12, but I have warmed up to it.
I mean, you know me, like I'm super old school.
Yeah, you are.
I was fine with just a bunch of bowl games and a national champion because that's the other thing that, like, as a traditionalist, gets a little bit lost. I mean,
Are you a BCS guy?
not necessarily. Well, I guess so. Like I don't really know enough about like how the BCS like worked and operated and pulling those things out, but I like the notion of having like the Rose Bowl, for example, being the Big Ten champion and the Pac-12 champion. This whole the thing that college football I think has really gotten wrong in Spaceballs 2, the quest for more money, is losing what made it special compared to the NFL. I mean, we say for the NCAA basketball, we call them a national champion, but it's a tournament. It's mostly chaotic fun. Really, the team that wins the tournament more often than not isn't the actual number one team in the country for college basketball, and we all can kind of acknowledge that. I think football, the thing that made it special was the bowl game system because there's too many teams for everybody to play each other the way that the NFL does and having a playoff system. And I understand that it's more about getting the eyeballs, getting the money, getting the revenue, all of this stuff. I mean, that's why we have a flipping Minnesota 5-7 team playing in a bowl game. It's because there's not enough good teams for all the different bowls, for all the different people to have money to slap their logo on a particular game. I'm a fan of, if you want to call it, the BCS championship game or what have you. I just feel like you don't necessarily need to have specifically a national champion in a game that is as regional as college football is. But here we are, we're globalizing it. We're having, potentially Rutgers and Washington facing off against each other in probably the two most distant time zone matchup travel things in the Big Ten. I understand why it's going where it's going. I'm just saying it's a little like that's part of what factors into my thinking on this too. It's just like I don't have enough care about it because I think it's a dumb thing. I mean, for 140 whatever years, we got by just fine enjoying bowl games for what they were, trying to make a playoff for all the money. Like it's just a little bit of a cash grab, and that's part of what gripes me too.
Yeah, but I'll counter a couple things, a couple points. First off, the whole conference realignment with the travel, that kind of rubs me a little bit wrong. But as far as the playoff committee, I think the 4 and now expanding to 12 is great because under the BCS system, you can argue that if you lose one game, your season's done, but you can still lose one game and your season could still be done in the current system. But if it was the BCS system, it would probably be Michigan and Washington right now.
I'd be good with that. I'd be fine with that.
I think it's more fun to see how Alabama does against Michigan because I think Alabama's going to win, by the way, because historically, how do you beat Alabama? You give them, a passing game, you pass over Bama, and you run with the quarterback. The strategic run offense does not do well against Bama. Now, it is a different Alabama team. It is a little bit different time. But if you watch the SEC title game, Georgia couldn't run on Alabama. So Michigan's go-to thing is running. We'll pick this game in later weeks. I don't want to talk too much about it, but I'd actually think Alabama's going to beat Michigan personally. And that's going to be a big, F you to all the SEC haters if that happens. But, Tom, I like the playoff because the BCS, it's just two teams. It's computers. We don't take account the eye test. I like it. And I have one more point to counter too, as far as you talking about the 5-7 teams. I don't think the committee cares about this part of it, but they care about the money. I agree with you as far as ESPN, the committee, all the networks. That's what they care about. But actually, all these extra teams getting in bowl games, that's very good for them. I've covered college football, Mizzou, Arkansas State, Arkansas. They get extra practices. There's mandated practices. And this is not only good for the programs to practice, they actually get their younger guys a chance to practice, the guys that weren't getting reps.
And they're going to have to with the transfers that are going on.
Exactly.
Ohio State's going to be starting a whole new quarterback this year. Duke is going to be starting a whole new quarterback.
Well, right, but that's what I'm saying. So it allows you to have that extra practice time, that extra camaraderie with your team. Not to mention these bowl games. That's a great opportunity for your kids to bond together, to see a different place. The teams go to all sorts of historical sites. When I covered Arkansas State sports, I covered the GoDaddy Bowl. We went down for the week. They had the famous ships in Mobile, Alabama. They were going on all these tours, all these team activities. They went to the Children's Hospital. to help kids with cancer. There's just a lot of like behind the scenes things that people don't really think about in bowl weeks. Not to mention it's big for your recruiting. Like, you say you're in a bowl game, the game's on television. You get your recruits to say, oh, look, these guys are in a bowl game. So there's all sorts of different advantages all the schools get by playing in a bowl game that a lot of us don't really think about as fans. I've had that like perspective of having covered the sports, and
Sure.
I know how much the teams, the players, the coaches, how much it means to have that extra time with your team so that you are in that bowl game setting. It's like, think about this from a recruiting aspect. You can argue that you're busier, makes you even more busy with the recruiting, but then, you tell the recruit, let's get you in this day. We got practice for the bowl game, instead of another coach is like, I've got all the time in the world. Come in whenever you want. It just sounds better. So I love all the bowl games. I hope they don't go away. I love what they're going to do with 12 teams, Tom. But as far as this one, I'm going to disagree with you. You're going to say it's not the story. Did they get it right? I'll say it is the story, because it's really, really fun to talk about this. And it is important. I mean, the Florida governor is proposing suing the CFP. Have you seen that? I mean, that's outrageous, of course. He's got other issues to work on. I don't know if that's like a election grabbing thing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely that's what we call
votes.
pandering in the election business.
But I'm just saying, everyone is talking about this, and it is a lot of fun to talk about. Like I said, personally, I would put Georgia in, but I can understand why they wouldn't put them in, because they're not a conference champion. Like, I'm not livid with Georgia not getting put in. I get that Texas is a conference champ. I get they beat Alabama. So with what the committee decided overall, I'm pretty okay with it, even though I would have flipped one team. But I think given them doing the whole test of eye test, the test of resume, the test of head-to-head, what they came up with is probably mostly okay. For me, the biggest one that I struggle with is Georgia, not FSU, though, because you go from 1 to 6. But my question for you, I'm going to put you on the spot, Tom, because I know you hate this, but if you did care, what would your top 4 teams be?
Top 4 teams.
Top 4 teams.
Michigan, Washington.
This is where it gets tough.
It is where it gets tough. I would probably go Alabama, FSU.
Okay.
Because and like, this is one of like the little notes that I had, where if we're going to sit here and say that a week 2 loss by 10 against Texas is diminished, it's not as bad of a loss because it happened earlier in the year and Alabama's gotten better. On the flip side, we have to say, well, Texas, that win isn't as good. Like, if we're going to diminish the LSU victory for Florida State, but then not diminish the Alabama. So, and again, it's the same thing with as far as the weaker conference bit goes. You lost to Oklahoma in season, and you won your title, but the Big 12 isn't an especially deep conference or anything like that. And it's a shame that we're going to be factoring in an injury here, and that's part of it. I mean, especially when you have Jordan Travis saying, I wish that I broke my leg. I wish I got injured earlier in the season so that everybody could see what this team could do without me. Like, that is, to me, just a horrible, horrible sentiment that he feels he has to say.
That has to matter to me, though, because again, if Jordan Travis is there, that's where the debate gets really, really interesting, and there is a little bit of a debate for me. But the fact that he's not there, that's what clinches it to me to say that they're just unequivocally not a top 4 best team. Well, no, it stinks, and that's why we need the 12. Because if we have the 12, you physically cannot leave out an undefeated team out of the CFP. You go undefeated, you get 1 loss, you're in. So all the teams with no losses and 1 losses. Now, the 2-loss teams are going to gripe amongst themselves. There's still going to be somebody mad. But if you lose 1 game or 0 games in a major conference, or even in non-major conference. You lose no games,
Mhm.
you're in with a 12. That's why I like the 12, because I feel less bad leaving out a 2-loss team in the playoff system, because it's like, oh, you had 2 times where you weren't at your best. Whereas I could dismiss it like you had one off game. It's not indicative of your season as a whole. You played one really good
Mhm.
team. This, and that happened in that one game. That's why I like the 12, Tom, because
Yeah.
there's not going to be a single one-loss team that would get left out, out of a Big Ten, out of an SEC, even out of a ACC or Big 12. You get one
Mhm.
loss, you're in. You get 0 losses, you're in. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I think Texas just gets in because of where they're going to be going in future seasons. I mean, looking at, okay, they beat an 18th ranked Oklahoma State, 23rd ranked Kansas State, and a 24th ranked Kansas this season with a loss to Oklahoma. And again, diminishing that win against Alabama because it happened earlier in the year type of thing. It's like I could see an argument on merit, on season long merit for Florida State over Texas. And I actually think that would be kind of like a fun matchup to see, quite frankly, between those two teams if they were to meet. But
Yeah,
that's what I would put as the top
Florida
four.
State, they still just, for me, the LSU win was it. And I mean,
Mm.
Alabama beat LSU too. So Ole Miss beat LSU. So, I mean, did Georgia play LSU? Who
Mm-hmm.
did LSU lose to? So, I mean, like, all those teams have that
Yeah,
LSU win, if that makes sense. LSU lost to, I'm
yeah.
pulling it up here on my phone. They lost to Alabama. They lost to Florida State. And their other loss was to Ole Miss. They actually didn't play. They didn't play Georgia
Mm-hmm.
this year. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
mean, Ole Miss is a 11th ranked team in the nation there. So yeah, I would just say, yeah, I would put Florida State in over Texas and probably have it be Michigan, Florida State, Washington, Alabama type of thing is probably where I'd
in
go. So
Texas, like Texas didn't like the Bama win is what really got them set. Because I mean, K State again,
hmm
decent team. Mizzou beat Kansas State this year.
hmm
They beat Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game. They're all right.
they have 4 losses on the season. Like
Yeah, I
it's
mean, like Kansas wasn't even in the top 25 when the rankings ended. They were
mhm.
top 25 at the time of playing, but so I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But Georgia and Bama, SEC. But anyway, we
Mhm.
can go on forever, Tom. But
Oh,
I,
absolutely.
I, I actually thought you might pick Georgia, but FSU for Mr. Casselman. Like, that's just
I mean,
not surprising because you like
if we're
undefeated.
yeah, like if we're
I mean,
looking at the
like
criteria, because let me pull up. I have the bylaws
Louisville
here.
lost to Kentucky, by the way,
Mhm.
just recently before that conference championship game, and that's the same Kentucky team. Let me pull it up,
Yeah.
and I know it gets tricky when you're playing. They played who over here, but
Mhm.
Alabama beat Kentucky 49-21. Georgia beat Kentucky 51-13. I know the transitive property is a very
Mhm.
difficult thing to get into, but that's a Kentucky team. Mizzou beat them by 17.
Mhm.
All the decent SEC teams Kentucky played, they were losing by, I mean, they lost by 4 touchdowns to Bama. They lost by, I got to do math now, but a lot more than that to Georgia, 5 touchdowns plus. So if that Kentucky team won at Louisville, does that make FSU's ACC championship win against Louisville less impressive? I argue yes. But that's just me. So
Mhm. Yeah, no, there's a lot of different ways to go, but we will move on to the NFL where we have a game to recap pretty quickly, especially because there's a couple of interesting storylines that have come out of it, along with a few big games coming up this week. So we just saw the San Francisco 49ers go into Philadelphia and, quite frankly, smack down the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that coming into the game had 1 loss so far on the season. It was a game in which Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions to a pretty stingy New York Jets defense. But of course, the Jets offense not really all that great, and that yielded a loss for the Eagles. But as far as the NFC goes, I mean, we've pretty much said all season long, preseason, during the season, at every iteration, Eagles and 49ers are the top two. I think at this point, Dallas has moved itself up into a single team second tier in the NFC. I mean, they definitely have a matchup that we'll be talking about later on in the segment. But as far as not just the NFC, but the NFL as a whole, because we saw last week Chiefs drop a game to the Packers. We've seen, so basically the AFC is Dolphins, Ravens, Chiefs, I believe, 1, 2, 3. As far as that goes,
Jaguars
all teams
are up there too, but they just
3 losses. The Jaguars with 3 losses as well. Of course,
the
Trevor
Jaguars
Lawrence.
have 4. Chiefs and Jags have 4. Dolphins and Ravens have 3. But KC has the tiebreaker on the Jags, on the Ravens, and on the Dolphins. So if they finish with the same amount of losses, KC gets the 1 seed in the AFC.
Exactly. But really the point is none of those teams have necessarily separated themselves out as a true standout favorite. Has San Francisco done that with this win over the Philadelphia Eagles? Are they now, in your mind, the team to pick, the team to beat to win the Lombardi Trophy this year?
So, Tom, typically I try not to base everything on just one game. You just heard me talk about the CFP. Look at the season as a whole. Try not to do the overreaction Monday, the Monday morning quarterback, but it's Thursday. I've had some time to think about it, Tom, and I'm going to go ahead and say, with how much they won by, with how it looked watching the game, with how it looked on the stat sheet, yes, San Francisco is the clear favorite to win the Super Bowl. I'm like 50-50. Like you told me, San Fran versus the field. I mean, I want the Chiefs to win. I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm 50-50. Because I'm convinced they're the team to beat in the NFC. I think the only reason why I would say that they wouldn't make the Super Bowl would be injuries. Because, I mean, Deebo Samuel told us that Philly game would have been different last year if not for injuries. And I believe him based on what I saw. I believe him. It wasn't that they beat the Eagles. Like them beating the Eagles, not necessarily a surprise, but the fact that they beat them by that much, shocking. Absolutely just crazy. I mean, completely mad-handled them on both sides of the ball. They could do whatever they wanted. 314 passing yards, 146 rushing yards. They could run, they could pass, they could do whatever they wanted with Philly. They were literally toying with them, Tom. And that's despite a bad first quarter. It was weird. Like the first quarter, they were actually getting beat down pretty badly. Philly settles for field goals. The last 3 quarters of the game, I mean, the Niners put up 42 points in 3 quarters on the road. Their defense was pressuring Jalen Hurts on every single play. They only had 3 sacks, Tom. If it was a less mobile quarterback, if they were playing like, let's just say the Patriots and Mac Jones, they might have had 8 or 9 sacks in that game. That's how bad it was. I mean, the score actually, I almost think, I mean, Philly got a garbage time touchdown at the end. It was 42-19. The score was actually not indicative of how much of a blowout this game was, in my opinion, because they had complete control on both sides, and they've got zero weaknesses, 0 question marks for me. You can talk about Brock Purdy. We'll talk about it in the next segment. But Brock Purdy, to me, is a very good quarterback. I cannot call him a weakness because he's got the best passer rating. He's got the best QBR. He is statistically the most efficient quarterback in the league. Yes, part of that is the offense. Yes, it's the weapons, all that. But like that's where we would go to for a weakness. And I can't call him a weakness. Maybe the kicker, but he seems to be settling in. I mean, you look at what San Francisco's doing this season, Tom. They are 2nd in scoring defense. They are 3rd in scoring offense. They're top 5 in total defense and top 5 in total offense. You look at their linebacker, Fred Warner, might be the best linebacker in the NFL, pure linebacker. Nick Bosa is a top 5 pass rusher. Chase Young could be like McCaffrey, a sort of rejuvenation, joining a new team, getting healthy, not even facing double teams. You ask Chase Young to be your number 2 or number 3 pass rusher. I mean, you got Trent Williams on the offensive line. You got McCaffrey in the backfield. Deebo Samuel, the most underrated player in the NFL, him or Keenan Allen. He's just an X factor. All those games they lost, he wasn't there. He didn't play. Now he's healthy. Purdy's healthy. Kittle, great tight end. Isn't even putting up the numbers he could because of how rich that offense is. Ayuk, this team has no weaknesses, Tom. I'm looking at some of the other top teams in the NFL. The Dolphins defense getting better, but just okay. We're not really saying they're great on defense. That's a weakness. The Eagles defense right now, they're one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL. That's a weakness. It's now been 12 weeks, Tom. We can't sit here and say, oh, they'll figure out the secondary. They didn't do it against the Niners. That's a glaring weakness for Philadelphia. Kansas City, again, I think they're going to play better than they have, but the receiving core, it's week 12. That's a weakness. That is a weakness for Kansas City. The Ravens, say all you will about Lamar Jackson, how explosive he is. Their passing game is non-existent, Tom. You got to be able to pass the ball in the playoffs. That's a weakness. Jacksonville, Christian Kirk. Talk about the Trevor Lawrence injury. Is he going to be the same quarterback down the stretch? Hopefully so. He just lost one of his best weapons, Christian Kirk. Travis Etienne battling an injury. I mean, and let's just be honest. Jacksonville, they got to prove it to me before I can count them as a real contender. I mean, Dallas has looked great. Haven't beaten anybody. Do they have a number 2 receiver? What about their red zone offense? What about the defense against Seattle? Oh my gosh, yeah, the defense looks great, but they play someone remotely good on defense. What happened? All these NFL teams have question marks. For me, the only question mark with the Niners is, can they stay healthy? So, yeah, they are, no question, the favorite in the NFL. And that's coming from a Chiefs fan who picked the Chiefs to win the whole thing, who knows how great Mahomes is, who knows how great Andy Reid is in the playoffs. The 49ers are definitely the favorite in the NFL for me, Tom. No question about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are, I'm right, well, not right there with you. I also think that the 49ers are the current favorite to win the Super Bowl. But I'm not 50-50 flip between the 49ers and the field. I think it's a much smaller percentage, but still above everybody else. Because you know me, I like my DVOA. The 49ers, number 1 in DVOA. They have the top offense and the 4th best defense. As far as
I'm not so convinced. The DVOA even proves it, Tom.
There you go. I mean, and there's a pretty stark drop off because we've got San Francisco and Baltimore right up there at the top, and then as far as the total DVOA percentage goes, then you've got a pretty steep drop off to Kansas City, Miami, Dallas, Buffalo, Detroit, and Philadelphia. So they also kind of fits with the eye test of how these teams have been playing and how they have been winning. And yeah, I mean, there were definitely some advantages for the 49ers coming into this game. I mean, they'd played on Thanksgiving, so they had a couple extra days off as opposed to the Eagles coming off of an overtime win. So that's like one of those little small things. As far as that goes, also Jalen Hurts with a knee injury, he's not at 100%. So that's why I'm saying the 49ers are the favorite. But I don't think it's necessarily a majority to say over the field or even that when we get to the playoffs that they are definitely going to be the team that I pick over the Philadelphia Eagles, a team which still feels like they have not played their best football game this season.
But it's week 12.
It's week 12.
Week 14, actually, I think. 12 games, week 14.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's either this is what Philadelphia is, or maybe there is still an extra gear that they can unlock, because even with their win against Kansas City, didn't look great in that first half, but kind of locked everything down and pulled out that win in the second half. Same thing going up against MVS. Buffalo. What's up?
Tip of the cap to MVS as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's
for
little
dropping the ball.
That's why the Eagles have the best record, but on DVOA, I mean, 7th best offense, 21st ranked defense.
Yeah.
That's why there's a bit of a disparity between record and metrics for them. But yeah, I'm going with San Francisco as the best team in the NFC, as the best team in the NFL right now. And it's really, I think, a couple different factors are going to depend on making it to the Super Bowl. I mean, the Eagles currently have the best record in the conference, and looking at their schedule, they've got a game coming up Sunday Night Football in Dallas, in Jerry World, but then they close out at Seattle, at home against the Giants, at home against the Cardinals, and on the road against the Giants. I think at worst, the Eagles are ending the season with 3 losses. And of course, San Francisco would have the tiebreaker over them, but San Francisco doesn't really have a cakewalk schedule as they've got a matchup against the Seahawks, which I think is a very winnable game. But they're also going to be hosting the Ravens. And then, I mean, Rams, that's still a winnable game, but that could be a significant thing in terms of home field advantage, not necessarily for the location, but for that really, really crucial bye week. If whoever's at atop each conference, having an extra week to get a little bit healthier, a little bit more rested for that little 3-game spurt to try to make it and win the Super Bowl, I think that's going to end up being really, really crucial, especially for a team like Philadelphia, where they have as many dings and injuries as they have had, making sure everybody is as healthy as they can be for a playoff run. If they end up as the 2 seed and they have to go and play all those games, and San Francisco is the 1 seed, for example, that's a significant advantage for the 49ers in that one. So looks like we pretty much agree to different levels of degrees.
Yeah,
but
real quick, I just want to counter just like San Francisco just went into Philadelphia and won. I agree with you to an extent that the 1 seed for me matters more for the bye week itself.
Yes.
But I think San Francisco, we've seen what they've done in recent playoff seasons. They won in the Lambeau Field. They've beaten the Packers. They just went into Philadelphia this season and beat Philadelphia. These cold weather environments that San Francisco shouldn't win in. They've won in Dallas in the playoffs in recent years. I don't think the 49ers care if it's a road game. I think that's a team that knows how to win.
I'm saying literally the rest is the biggest factor. It's not even about home field advantage.
I think they're fine. They haven't had the home field advantage in a lot of these playoff runs. I just don't think it affects San Francisco for me, just based on what I've seen from that football team. I would say it's a negligible difference. I know they've had injuries, but they're actually really healthy right now. So they almost had that time to heal up with Debo, with McCaffrey. Like they're a very, very healthy. Purdy even had the concussion symptoms. I think they're like, I trust them to win on the road. I think the home field in that game for me is negligible difference, if anything.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it matters if they get the 2 seed. A lot of it is going to go down to that Philly Dallas game, though, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I don't know. I think the Niners, even if they get the 2 seed, I would still pick them over Philadelphia in the NFC Championship for me, Tom.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's totally fair. And I mean, a big part of that is, the betting odds now have the quarterback for the 49ers, Brock Purdy, as the lead favorite. And I just got to say, Adrian Peterson is the last non-quarterback who's ever going to win the NFL MVP.
Yeah, if you look at the odds, that's for sure.
Like that, we're just never going to pick a non-quarterback ever again. I think it's ridiculous that this is the award that it has become, that MVP is the best quarterback in the NFL, or not even really best quarterback. I know Brock Purdy has been playing really, really good football, but we saw what happened to the 49ers when they were missing their left tackle, when they were missing their running back, when they were missing arguably their most important wide receiver. I'd say Brandon Ayuk is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel, but because Deebo Samuel is so diverse, he's really, really important.
I actually think Deebo's better, personally. I think they're close, but Deebo's, for me, is a better receiver and better overall player. Yeah. But that's just me.
I mean, in short, I don't think Brock Purdy is the MVP of the NFL. I mean, if we're going to base it off overall team success, if we're going to base it on, all these different, he's not the most valuable player. And it's not even close, in my opinion. If we want to talk value to the team and everything, I mean, look what's happening in Dallas. I mean, the fact that Dallas played Thursday night football last week as opposed to Brock Purdy playing on Sunday, that's the difference as far as MVP odds. I mean, Dak played a fantastic game against Seattle. Is there any argument in your mind for Brock Purdy as the MVP? I personally think everybody's just losing their fool minds right now.
So real quick, first off, the odds are plus 300 for Purdy on DraftKings, plus 350 for Hurts and Prescott, Tua and Mahomes at plus 850, Lamar Jackson plus 900, and Tyreek Hill and CMC plus 1600.
All of them more valuable than Purdy, in my opinion. Easily.
The argument for Brock Purdy, Tom, is that his team has been the most dominant team. He's number one in passer rating, number one in QBR. He's throwing for a ton of touchdowns. That's the argument statistically in win-loss. That's the argument to be made. And I think it's not a crazy argument. Like for me, Tom, I do agree that he's not the MVP. But
he's not most valuable on his team.
I'm gonna go the same way that we went with the 49ers one. I agree with you, but I don't feel as strongly as you. I mean, McCaffrey, to me, I would lean as the most valuable, although Debo is very, very close. Purdy's very, very close. I'd have to really sit there and, really decide which one of those guys is most valuable. I'm not going to be upset if you said it's Purdy. I'm not going to be upset if you said it's Debo. I would not be upset if it's CMC. I do lean CMC being the most valuable with what he does as a runner, as a receiver. The argument for Brock Purdy to not win it would be that if you're listing off your top 5 quarterbacks in the league, I would say almost nobody's going to say Brock Purdy's top 5. I think he has cemented himself as top 10, though, Tom. That lower echelon of the top 10, for me, I have no problem saying he's top 10. But I think very few people, maybe Brock Purdy's mom, his dad, his cousin, his sister, I don't know if he has a significant other, his teammates, those guys will probably say top 5. But I think most football people wouldn't say he's a top 5 quarterback. And if he's not a top 5 quarterback, how can he be the MVP of the league? That's the argument there. That's kind of where I lean. The combination of just eye test and feel watching the games. So I would agree with you. But I'd also say that there's not really a clear-cut deserving candidate. A guy that you look at is far and above the rest. And that's how it opens up for a season that Brock Purdy's having. That's where maybe he sneaks in as the MVP. Now, personally, Tom, I don't think he's going to win the MVP. I think it's going to be Dak or Hurts. I think the winner of the Sunday night game this week is probably going to get the MVP. If the Cowboys beat the Eagles in this game and they run the table and they end up getting a top 3 seed in the NFC, or who knows, a top 2 seed, tiebreaker goes to the Dallas quarterback because it's Dallas. They have one MVP in Emmitt Smith. How much would the NFL love to have that out there? The guy that was getting blasted last year, all of a sudden Dak Prescott's the MVP. Now, looking at the stats, if you look at the stats between guys like Mahomes, Hurts, Purdy, Tua, there's actually a fairly negligible difference. Like, it's fairly close. I mean, look at touchdown passes. Like, Mahomes has 4 less than Purdy, and he's like 5th in the league in touchdown passes. If Mahomes has a 5 touchdown passing game, he can be the number 1, leader in the NFL in passing touchdowns. For me, if I'm going based on who I think the most valuable player is, I'm going to say it's Mahomes every single season, just because I know he's the best player. It's the same argument that, we could make about LeBron, about Messi all those years. I mean, it's very, very obvious that the Kansas City receivers are really, really bad. Like, they've got the most drops in the NFL. They're dropping touchdown passes. They're misrunning routes. And despite all that, currently Mahomes is 8th in passing yards in the NFL. He is currently, I'm pulling it up on my phone here, 5th in touchdown passes, 1 less than Purdy, 2 less than Allen and Tua, and 4 less than Prescott. So statistically, Mahomes is still up there. He's 4th in QBR. So with all the issues on his offense, he's still up there neck and neck with these guys. So I think Mahomes has lesser guys than Hurts, lesser guys than Purdy, lesser guys than Prescott, lesser guys than Tua. So if I was forced to pick who I think is the MVP, I would be at a stalemate between Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, actually. I actually, believe it or not, would lean Tyreek Hill, Tom, just because we're sitting here talking about how there's not a clear-cut player that stands out. Well, Tyreek Hill is about to become the first receiver ever with 2,000 receiving yards in a season. I love Tua. I'm very high on Tua, but even I would be crazy to say that Tyreek Hill hasn't helped make Tua really, really good. By the way, A.J. Brown did the same thing for Jalen Hurts. By the way, Stephon Diggs did the same thing for Josh Allen. All these quarterbacks, I mean, Jamar Chase for Joe Burrow or Jake Browning, I guess, these days. But, these quarterbacks need a receiver to really, really make them, really, really good. The age-old saying is if you've got a terrible offensive line, you've got terrible receivers. Not even Brady or Manning are going to go out there and throw for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. So I'm looking at who's been the most dominant at their position, and McCaffrey's close, but still rushing touchdowns, rushing yards. There's guys in that environment. He's in an incredible environment to succeed as well. So I would lean Tyreek Hill, Tom, for me. 1,481 receiving yards. The closest guy is CeeDee Lamb, 1,182. So if I was handing out the award, it's between Hill and Mahomes for me, and maybe I give a slight edge to Hill. But as far as who I think is going to win it, it's going to be either Hurts or Prescott. Right now, Purdy's the favorite, but how much? I'm barely plus 50 better. How many brownie points are Hurts or Prescott going to get for winning that head-to-head matchup? Dak, by the way, of all the quarterbacks, he's actually my number 2 behind Mahomes because he's got CeeDee Lamb, just like Mahomes is Kelsey. He's got Kelsey, who's, by the way, also injured, banged up, not quite right this season as well. But Dak Prescott has CeeDee Lamb and who else, right? Really, literally. Who is the other great number 2? So I think that Prescott and Mahomes are doing more with less, whereas Tua, Purdy, these guys should be doing what they're doing with the weapons they have. So that's where I land. I agree with you. Purdy's not my MVP, but I wouldn't be infuriated if he won. I would disagree, but I know you're more on the infuriated side. Like there's not a chance this guy should be in that running. For me, he's in the running. He's deserved it to be in the running. I wouldn't personally hand him that MVP. Who would you give yours to, Tom?
I would probably go Dak Prescott, followed by Christian McCaffrey, followed by Jalen Hurts.
Okay, so you think McCaffrey over Tyreek Hill?
Hill would be 4th for me. I mean, when we saw Aaron Rodgers win MVP over Cooper Kupp, that convinced me that no matter how good of a season a receiver has, they're not going to win.
No, it's not going to happen.
I mean, that was an absolutely incredible season that Kupp had. And Tyreek can have as good, maybe a little bit better. I don't think that's going to ever.
Well, and I agree. It's plus 1,600. It's going to be a quarterback. I'm just guessing in my head.
It aggravates me.
And this is a legitimate debate, but do you think that McCaffrey's more valuable than Hill because he runs and receives? Because I think, they're both close.
Yes.
I think Tyreek Hill is a little bit more he's so impossible because there's nothing you can do against speed and quickness. You can sit there and prepare all you want, but there's literally nothing you can do. And for example, Jalen Waddle, when they put up 70 points against the Broncos, Jalen Waddle didn't play in that game. I know the running backs were really, really important, but for me, I think Tyreek Hill has that you can't teach speed thing. So I think to me, he's more valuable than McCaffrey personally by a little bit.
It's definitely close, but I just find McCaffrey to be a bit more valuable for everything that San Francisco likes to do. I mean, it's definitely, you could flip a coin when I'm saying like, this is my MVP listing. We're talking like fractions of a percentage. Like I would probably have it like it's a 4-way race between those guys. If we want to actually say like most valuable as in their team is going to be appreciably worse without them. That's what I would kind of quantify that is for my top 4.
Where do you put my guy Mahomes?
I'll have him 5 then.
5 then? Okay.
Yeah. Like I think like the MVP should go to kind of like the best players having the best seasons. I mean, I just don't think Purdy's.
I will say Mahomes is having statistically, again, rushing touchdowns when you get factored that in, it gets close. But statistically, Mahomes is actually having a better season than Hurts. He's got more passing yards. He's got more passing touchdowns. Let me see who's got the better QBR. I have it pulled up on my phone. QBR. Yeah, Mahomes ahead of Hurts. So stats-wise, despite having A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, Mahomes is actually having, despite all the perceived issues the Chiefs are having, he's actually statistically having a better season than Jalen Hurts.
I don't know if they're if perceived. I think these are legitimate issues. I think the Chiefs are finding themselves in a spot of trouble after neglecting a wide receiver a little bit.
See,
but
that's where it gets interesting though, because Juju Smith-Schuster is decent, not great. It's basically the same receiving core losing Juju Smith-Schuster, and that's where I land on the whole thing of they're just like, they're not great, but they're playing at the worst they possibly can. Like, there's no way that they don't play better. And so that's my take, because last year, Mahomes, you add up rushing and passing yards, he broke the single season NFL record for most total yards by quarterback in the history of the NFL. Had the 17th game. That's why he got it. But still, he broke that record that Drew Brees previously had. And it's a pretty similar receiving core. I mean, they're worse because Juju's gone, but Juju is like not amazing, you know. Like those other guys
it's more about the development. We're not seeing development out of Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. I mean, we're seeing a little bit out of Rashee Rice, but I mean, and this is all stuff that we'll be addressing a bit with a matchup later. Let's wrap up with the Eagles and Cowboys game that we've alluded to a couple of times. Looking at the Vegas line on Sunday Night Football, Dallas is at home for this matchup. They are favored by 3. So, Kamen, do you feel that Dallas is going to make a statement game? They've already played in Philadelphia, lost 28-23. So Philadelphia already has 1 win, but of course, that was on the road. For the Cowboys, at least, as a home game for Philadelphia. And we're facing kind of a similar, a little bit of advantage that Dallas is going to have in terms of they played on Thursday night. Philadelphia played on Sunday, so a little bit of extra rest for the Cowboys. Does all that, in your mind, add up to significant enough advantage that you pick the Cowboys to win this game, or do you think the Eagles, underdogs on the road, are going to pull out a victory and get an iron grip upon the NFC East?
So I have this work confidence pool we do, same as the Capital Bowl Mania. I know you and I do a pick'em that we do not with confidence points. I think my work confidence pool, I've got 1 point on this one.
Sure.
I am not sure. I'll be honest with you. I like making a pick. I like being bold. God's honest truth, Tom, I don't know. I agree with you. The intangibles favor Dallas, less games. I actually think matchup-wise, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, their passing game has been unbelievable. Philadelphia's secondary is atrocious. Dallas is at home. They're more well-rested. They're playing better ball lately. So I think all the intangibles favor Dallas. But I think Philly is slightly better of a team. Again, I think they got 2 great receivers instead of 1 for Dallas. It's not like Dallas's defense, their secondary looked amazing by any means against Seattle. Metcalf got 3 touchdown catches. I mean, Dallas hasn't, this game's going to tell us a lot about Dallas and so are the next few weeks, because they played the Bills, the Dolphins. The only team over 500 Dallas beat was Seattle, and they were 1 game over 500. So they, when they played the Niners, they got clobbered. They played the Eagles, it was close, but they lost. So I'm going to pick Philadelphia only for the simple reason that I trust them more in this type of game. I think they're really, really good in the close games. That loss against San Fran was in a way coming, because they should have lost to Buffalo. They should have lost to San Francisco. If you ask me, who's more likely to win by 10, by 17, by 20 points in this game, I would say Dallas at home. They get rolling. That crowd gets into it. They're the more likely
Mhm.
team to get the blowout. But it's a division game. Teams that know each other well. It seems like it's going to be a close game. And Philadelphia are masters of the close games, masters of winning the games they shouldn't win. So mainly for that reason and that reason only, I will take the Eagles to win on the road, but I will not have Eagles +3 in betting locks, even though I'm picking them outright, just because I don't have a great feel for this one either way, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup because we're looking at some strength versus weakness here where Dallas's passing game, I mean, I think that Dak Prescott could absolutely throw the heck out of the ball, whether it's CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks, whomever, and that they could still lose the game because Dallas, like you said, uh, their strength of victory on the season, their strength of schedule, they're 9-3, but it's, let's see, let me pull up really quickly the standings. Strength of schedule is 39-7. Okay, so less than a 40% win percentage for their opponents, and
Does
it
that
dips
show you
even
where?
lower.
Does it show you where that's relative to the rest of the league? Like,
I don't have it in any sort of ranking, but the Eagles, for example, are 49-3, the 49ers 53-1, Lions 55-8, Falcons 42-5. I mean, all the teams around them. It is the lowest strength of schedule and strength of victory in the NFC. It's the lowest strength of schedule and strength of victory in the NFL. They are
yeah, I
just
figured it
ever so
was.
slightly. You're not going to be happy to hear this. The only other team with a sub 40% strength of schedule and strength of victory, Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
So
That's the
these are
story
two
about
teams.
both of them.
Exactly, is that
Yeah,
they've beaten the teams that they ought to beat, but don't necessarily have a statement win.
except for the
And
Cardinals for Dallas.
yeah, that's one loss that they shouldn't have on their schedule. And like looking at their wins again, nothing really jumps out at, like you said, as a massive victory. So I'm going to go with the Eagles as well on this one. I think that they have a really, really good offensive line, which manifests itself obviously in the tush push, the brotherly shove. But they also, like you said, divisional rivals. On pure talent, you cannot stop Micah Parsons, but I think the Eagles will be able to chip in enough on him to slow him down just a little bit. Eagles, I believe, are also getting Dallas Goedert, their tight end, back, and that's going to be pretty significant as well from a passing perspective, as well as a run game blocking perspective. So, yeah, I think that the Eagles are going to be able to have a grinded out type of victory. Um, but like, yeah, it wouldn't shock me either way. Like, I could also see Dallas winning this game too, because I mean, they're at home. They do fantastic on turf indoor surfaces. When they get out of doors, that's where it gets a little bit dicier for their offensive production. So they absolutely could, win a good old fashioned Texas shootout against Philadelphia. But I think the Eagles are going to muck it up just enough to eke out a victory here and really solidify their grip on the NFC East.
I have one side note, a little side note
Go
story.
for
I
it.
actually learned this from one of my customers at work in our sports memorabilia show. He's a huge Dallas Cowboy fan, and Dallas Goddard, his family
Mm-hmm.
is diehard Dallas Cowboy fans, and they named
Yes.
him Dallas after
Mm-hmm.
the Dallas Cowboys. And ironically, he's now on the rival team, tight end for the Eagles. So a little bit of
And
irony
do you know how that
there.
happened? The
No, go
Eagles
ahead.
traded literally one pick in front of the Cowboys. I can't remember if it was like second or third round or something like that, but they traded up just in front of Dallas to take Dallas Goedert and add them to their franchise. Otherwise, I think the Cowboys would have taken him
Ah,
because they had a bit of a needed tight end. So
the
yeah, a little bit of
irony.
trolling for the Philadelphia
Yes,
Eagles. That
of
so far, I mean,
course.
worked out pretty well for them. They
He's
got a
one of the
Super
best
Bowl
tight
with
ends in
this tight end.
football. He's easily
Exactly.
top 10, no question. Dallas Goddard.
Yeah, for sure. And all right, we've got moving over to the AFC, a matchup between a couple of teams that were kind of considered to be rivals before the Bengals kind of ascended and took
They're
over
still
that.
rivals.
I mean, they're still rivals. We thought that Chiefs and Bills was going to be the AFC rivalry. It's been Chiefs Bengals the past couple of years, but of course, with no Joe Burrow the rest of the season, it is highly unlikely that we can really count that as a rivalry for this particular season. Even
Jake
if
Browning, baby.
somehow, even if they
balling out. In Jake we trust.
I guess so. That kind of falls into like the really poor man's Brock Purdy, where that touchdown for Jamar Chase was 90% Jamar Chase putting in work and 10% Jake Browning for just
Jamar Chase is a pretty good guy to have to make a quarterback.
Pretty good guy to have. But the Bills coming off of a bye week and finding themselves in quite dire straits as they are currently on the outside of the playoffs, looking in at 6-6. They find themselves losing out on tiebreakers to the Denver Broncos, the Cincinnati Bengals, and of course, they find themselves behind a whole glob of teams at 7-5 with the Steelers, Browns, Colts, and Texans. So obviously, of course, this is a must-win for the Buffalo Bills. And as far as the Kansas City Chiefs go, I mean, I won't necessarily say it's a must-win given that they have a significant advantage in their division, given that they have a pretty significant advantage in conference record at 6-1. This game is obviously really important for them trying to get a 1 seed, trying to get that crucial bye week. But of course, until proven otherwise, the Chiefs fall into the similar category of the 49ers, where the rest is great. As far as location goes, they're happy to play a ball just about anywhere in the NFL. So, Kamen, coming off the bye week, do you think that the Bills have enough of a rest and tactical advantage going up against the Chiefs, coming up with a couple of different things? Or do you think that Kansas City is going to be the ones walking away with a victory this week?
Yeah, Casey's a 1.5 point favorite, and it opened at 2.5, which is, they say 2 to 3, 2.5 to 3 points is what they say is typically the edge for the home team. So I mean, Vegas would roughly think it's a pick 'em on a neutral field. A lot of people are betting on Buffalo, I believe, if that line is slipped by a point. Just a couple of things to counter what you said. I actually think Kansas City's 5 straight AFC championships. And obviously, Tom, I do agree to an extent that they can win anywhere, but all those years that Tom Brady won all those Super Bowls, made all those Super Bowls, now all these years the Chiefs are in the Super Bowls, they're winning them, they're making the AFC title game. A lot of that has come with the 1 seed. Getting the 1 seed, it's been very, very important in Tom Brady's career and very, very important early on in Mahomes' career. And I know we talk about the 1 seed a lot in terms of getting rest, in terms of home field, but it's also in terms of just having to have less great games in a row, less wins in a row. Because if you get the 1 seed, you win 2 games and you're right back in the Super Bowl just like that. So I think this is a massive game for Kansas City to get the 1 seed, which is still in play because they have all the tiebreakers. And I believe the Ravens have to play the Niners. The Jaguars play the Ravens head-to-head. The Dolphins got to play the Bills, the Cowboys. Kansas City's schedule after this game, pretty soft, Tom. They can win out after the Buffalo game.
It is Charmin soft after this game.
If you have it pulled up in front of you, I was going to pull it up. Let me know what it is.
I do.
I was looking at it the other day.
So after the Bills game this week, they are going to be in Foxborough to take on the Patriots. They're going to be hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. They're going to be hosting the Cincinnati Bengals, a considerably easier game without Joe Burrow. And then they will be on the road for the Chargers to close out the season.
Exactly.
So they could feasibly lose this game, but still be the top seed in the AFC.
Maybe. But if they win this game, in all likelihood, they will be the 1 seed in the AFC. So talent-wise, this game is pretty close. I think we can agree, talent-wise, it's pretty close. The Chiefs receivers have hurt them, but their defense is really, really talented. Now, they had some injuries this last game. Lost a linebacker, lost a safety. They're still waiting on Nick Bolton, so they're a little bit banged up, which I think contributed to that Green Bay Packer loss. But talent-wise, the teams are pretty close, I would say. I think Kansas City does really, really well against teams they're familiar with. Hence why they have all those AFC victories. Yeah, they're the best. Yes, the AFC West isn't necessarily amazing, but Mahomes lost his first road game I think in like his division in his career this year, I think it was against Denver. I think they've dominated the AFC West so much. You look at their losses this year, they lost to the Lions, the Eagles, and the Packers, NFC teams. I guess they're getting more familiar with Philly, but still not all that familiar. They should have won that game, by the way, if MVS caught the ball, if Mahomes didn't throw a red zone pick, if Kelsey didn't drop a fumble, which that's uncharacteristic for Kelsey to fumble. I think for me in a game that, again, I think is going to be close, a game that could go either way, but Kansas City's at home. What has Buffalo done all year long? They've lost the close games they probably should have won. I think in a close game, the coaching matters. I think Andy Reid and Spagnuolo, the Chiefs, they got the coaching edge against the Bills. And again, Josh Allen, great player, but, in the clutch, Mahomes, Allen, Mahomes. So I'll pick the Chiefs to win this game. I would not be shocked if Buffalo won.
Mhm.
Their backs are against the wall. They got a very talented team. They've had a bye week to prepare. They should, in theory, be healthier. They should be ready. But all these big games, Buffalo against the Eagles, same thing. They should have beat the Eagles. They outplayed them. They lost. There's just something about that Buffalo team. The Bronco game, they outplayed the Broncos. They should have won. They lost it. Chiefs at home in a scenario against a team that seemingly finds a way to lose. I think Kansas City will find a way to win. Give me the Chiefs in a close one. I guess they'll probably cover since it's -1.5, but this will be a one-score game, whether it's 3, 4, 6 or 7 points. Should be a close game, but I'll take the Chiefs in this one against the Bills.
We've been agreeing far too much on this show. I think I'm going to go with the Bills in this one for a couple of different reasons. This is going to be a double-edged sword with the desperation, because that can either, with the pressure of basically having to win this game, because if you fall to 6 and 7, you're pretty much done in the AFC, even with the big glob of yuck right in the middle there.
I'm gonna have fun and just counter you. I'm gonna say the Bills lose this game. They win out. They make the playoffs because their schedule isn't too bad down the stretch.
I mean, yeah, they get to host the Cowboys, then they close out against the Chargers, Patriots, and then in Miami against the Dolphins, which actually should be happy to have a road game in Miami on the 7th of January. That's actually pretty nice. I'd rather have it there than in Buffalo. But for this one, I mean, it's a pretty big statement game for Buffalo. I'm sure that with the extra rest, the extra attention to detail, I mean, the extra opportunity that, I mean, they fired Ken Dorsey, their offensive coordinator, just to get a little bit more comfortability, just a little bit more meshing for their offensive game plan. I'm going to go with the Bills for this one. I don't feel particularly confident in it for the record, but I mean, looking at just how the Chiefs have played so far this season, they have 3 games in which they have scored more than 30 points, which is pretty abnormal. I mean, against the Bears in week 3, where the Bears were absolutely atrocious, they put up 41. And then against the Raiders and the Chargers, no strong defenses there, they put up 31 points. But for the most part, looking at their schedule, they're scoring in the mid to sometimes high 20s. Because let's see, they got 27 against the Vikings, 23 against the Jets. Not bad given it's the Jets.
A lot of it is field goals, though, Tom. Same thing against the Green Bay game. I watched it. Their offense actually looked pretty good. They were just settling for field goals.
Exactly.
And again, I could sit there and argue the MVS pass interference call that wasn't called. Maybe they got a touchdown in that game. But I don't know. I know the offense isn't as good as it used to be, but it's also not as bad as people make it out to be. There's still a pretty good offense. Kansas City Chiefs.
It's just going to come down to, as in every single game, of course, the execution. And I think that the Bills, with a little extra rest, with a little extra preparation, I'm going to go ahead and take them on the road in this one, and really come out and make a statement game and saying, hey, we're not done in the AFC yet. Of course, I could also see them imploding and absolutely just falling apart, at which point we know the Sean McDermott era in Buffalo is over. He's toast. I'd say this is probably the defining opportunity for him to try to save his job after the season, given the lofty expectations the Bills had coming in and the quite frank gross underachieving that they've had at this point with winnable games that they did not come up with against the Patriots,
game,
against the Broncos, against the Eagles,
against the Jets.
It's against the Jets. Yeah, first week of the season, Aaron Rodgers going down, you still end up losing that game. Like the one little bit of saving grace is it's week 1, and we kind of know that that's still a little bit preseason for all the regulars in the NFL.
Playoff spot.
And again, that's where we need to put more emphasis on the preseason. But that's where we're going with that one. So
real quick, Tom, I also argue just a simple point. The last 4 or 5 years, again, Kansas City's offense may not be quite what they were, but they're still better than people think. Their special teams looks good. Their defense looks as good as ever. The Chiefs almost never lose 2 straight games. The odds of Kansas City losing 2 straight games, they're kind of got that target on their back. Everybody wakes up for the Chiefs. Everybody's prepared a little bit more. So it gets to be a little bit harder each year being the Chiefs, but they do not lose 2 games in a row. It just doesn't happen. I think I want to say, this is off the top of my head, but I think it might have been 2019, the last time they lost 2 in a row. And I think that was when Mahomes was either injured or coming off an injury, or he got injured during one of the games, something like that. So it's just something to think about. I'm not, even though I labeled the Niners as the favorite, if you ask me who was the second most likely team to win the Super Bowl, I'm picking the Chiefs for me. So let's not shut the door just yet, Tom.
Now, the door is definitely open on the Chiefs. So it'll definitely be a great game to see this upcoming Sunday. Let's move into betting locks of the week. Where good news, as a show, we had a push. Not necessarily a great breakdown, though.
Not for me. First time for the season under 500 for me. I think you're up to 13-11. I'm up to 10-13-1. So actually, is that? I'll do the math. Yeah, that does
I have that right. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that adds up. My first offer, but I'm going to go 3-0 this week to make up for it, Tom. I had the Chiefs minus 2.5 against the Eagles. That should have hit had MVS caught the ball, but no, he didn't. Eagles win 21-17. This is, by the way, from a few weeks ago. We had a bye week last week, so if these games sound old to you, it's because they are. Bengals +4 at the Ravens. Ravens won 34-20. I was thinking Burrow would show up, and he did, but he got injured, so that didn't help me. Chargers -3 at the Packers. Never, ever betting on the Chargers to win a close game ever again. Note to self, Packers winning 23-20. You had the Eagles +2.5 against the Chiefs. That was right. Ravens over 24.5 points against the Bengals. They got 34. Cowboys -7 first half line versus the Panthers. That was correct. They were up 17-3. I would have gone 2-1 last week, by the way, had we done our picks. I was highly invested. No idea what I would have done. Yeah, highly invested on the Texans and the Dolphins last week. Those teams covered. But I would have actually picked the Eagles to cover, and I would have missed that one because that's why I'm all in on San Fran, because they completely surprised me in that game. So, but anyways, go ahead.
Oh, yes. So for my locks this week, already talked about the Eagles and the Cowboys. We also talked about Bills and Chiefs, and that's a little bit shorter of a line at 1.5. But I feel a little bit better about the Eagles +3. Of course, we talked about how they got pretty much wrecked against the San Francisco 49ers, but Dallas, a much less proven team against top talent in the NFL. And if playing on turf in a dome is going to be beneficial for a team like the Dallas Cowboys, it's also probably going to be beneficial for a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who don't have to worry about sloppy ground, wet grass or anything like that with their outstanding pass rush. With their run game, they're going to be able to cut a lot better. So I'm just going to go Eagles +3 in a divisional game on this one. This line has moved against me a little bit. When I wrote it down a couple nights ago, it was Bengals +1 against the Indianapolis Colts. It has shifted to Bengals -1.5. But I'm still going to take the Bengals at home. Their defense is still solid enough. We saw an Indianapolis Colts team that needed overtime to beat a not very good Tennessee Titans team. And Jake Browning looks like he's doing enough with this offense to keep the Bengals at least relevant, at least in games. So I think they're going to win this one narrowly. I think that they're still going to feed Jamar Chase. Maybe they're going to be able to work T. Higgins in a little bit more as Higgins came back from a couple of weeks off of injury. Came back last week, had a couple of catches.
And
we'll
Tyler
see
Boyd will not be throwing the ball. I will tell you
and
that
Tyler
much.
Boyd will not be throwing the ball as well. That's one
Mr.
where
Picks.
it's, if you're the owner of the team, you're calling down to your head coach, and saying, hey, cut that out.
Yeah,
just don't do that. Fewer trick plays for the Bengals might lead to a win there. And then I'll go with the eventual champion of the NFC South, Falcons, -1.5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. Desmond Ridder at quarterback for the Falcons, Bijan Robinson. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are really banged up. So I'm going to go with the Falcons to hopefully win the game and, maybe throw a couple touchdowns. Desmond Ridder run a couple in. Fantasy team could use your help. So those are my 3 locks for the week. Kamen, what do you have?
Ooh, our fantasy is so close. 5 teams fighting for 4 playoff spots. I do not look good as far as the tiebreaker points. I'd argue I would look a lot better if Kirk Cousins didn't get injured for the season. Aaron Rodgers didn't get injured for the season. 2-quarterback league.
That's a song that a lot of folks are singing, unfortunately, this year.
So my locks of the week, I'll start with the game tonight. TJ Watt over 4.5 tackles. That is assists and solo tackles combined. This is a porous New England Patriot offense. I also like him over 0.75 sacks as well. But I have to pick one, so I'm going with the 4.5 tackles. You look at his last.
You can pick both if you want.
No, I'm going to only pick one for this one.
Okay.
But I'm just saying a bonus one if you're listening. So you look at his last 4 games, Tom: 6 tackles, 5 tackles, 6 tackles, and 8 tackles. So he's been over that total 4 games in a row. He is the best player on the field. There is, I don't want to say zero, because, let's be honest, George Pickens is actually talented. They're not getting him the ball the right way. But there is limited offensive talent and very little offensive ability on the field. Who's going to shine on Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime for the old folks out there? It's going to be TJ Watt. He's going to have a field day. It'll be tackles. It'll be sacks. It'll be forced fumbles. 4.5 total tackles feels really, really safe. I'm not usually as much in the player props as you are, Tom, but this one is probably one I feel really, really good about. By the way, it's like a historic over-under. It's like 30.5. And I just couldn't bring myself to bet the under, but I do think it's going to hit. Maybe I'll have to make that wager as well down the road.
It was 6-0 for Chargers Patriots last week.
My other bonus pick, and again, I don't want to go too hard on one game, but I was actually looking at betting on low stuff in this game. Bailey Zappi, no touchdown passes. It's -105. He's got no touchdown passes this season. He's thrown like 60-something passes. Not a single one of them has been a touchdown. They scored no points last week. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this game. I just don't want it to be where it's something funky where it's 14-14 or 13-13. It goes to overtime and the total hits in overtime. Something weird like that. So I'm going with the one I trust the most. And it's TJ Watt, who's the best player on defense. You can sit here and talk about Micah Parsons all you want. Myles Garrett all you want. The best player in the NFL, unequivocally on defense, TJ Watt, one of the all-time greats, the most disrespected player in the NFL. Because if anyone doesn't think he's the best player on defense, you are not looking at any stats. You're not watching any games. You're just doing yourself a disservice. This man's an absolute beast. Watch tonight just for him. There's no other reason to watch the game. Just watch TJ Watt and see what this guy does. He's incredible. Two more NFL picks. This is one I feel really good about. I'm actually a little surprised it's this low. Texans -3.5 at the Jets. This was originally 5.5. I don't know. Did Zach Wilson playing move the line by 2 points? That's just outrageous to think about. But I looked this morning on DraftKings, -3.5 Texans at the Jets. New York quarterback situation is a mess. Tim Boyle, Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, their offensive line is a mess. They're just a mess altogether. You look at what they're doing right now, 5 straight losses. Lost by 21 to the Chargers, 4 to the Raiders, 26 to the Bills, 21 to the Dolphins, and 5 against the Falcons. I have went ahead and moved the Texans in the category of a good NFL team. Whenever the Jets play a good NFL team, they seem to lose by 20 plus. So for them to lose by 4 or more, I feel really, really good. Big game for Houston, too. With the Trevor Lawrence injury, knock on wood, hopefully he's fine. But they're only 1 game back in the division. They're very much alive in the wild card race. This is a huge game for Houston. CJ Stroud, who we didn't even mention in the MVP race, which to me, he still has to be in that discussion, having a great season. I think Houston takes care of business, wins big against the Jets. Well, New York losing big has been a theme this season in the NFL. So I'm going to go ahead and bank on the other New York team losing big. That would be the Giants. I'll take the Packers -6.5 at the Giants. Same story, but arguably even worse, Tom. Giants against good football teams, which Green Bay, they've won 3 straight. They beat the Lions. They beat the Chiefs. They are a good football team. They are a good football team. They are a playoff football team to be. Green Bay Packers are definitely a good football team. Well, the Giants against good football teams lost by 32 to Dallas, lost by 40 to Dallas, 18 against the Niners, 21 against Seattle, 15 against Miami, 24 against the Raiders, who aren't even good. Yeah, they've won a couple games. They beat the Patriots, who is probably the worst team in the league.
They avoided a loss to the Patriots. That missed field goal by like 37 yards out or whatever. That's an avoided loss. That's not
I won a lot of money on that game, though. I had the Giants money line. So that was part of a parlay and individual bet. But anyway, all that aside, the Giants are miserable. The Jets are miserable. I think Houston and Green Bay are 2 teams with young quarterbacks, 2 young teams fighting for a playoff spot. They're both going to take care of business on the road. They will win big in those games. TJ Watt, take care of business, put up big numbers, more than 4.5 tackles. That is the rundown for my locks of the week.
All right, definitely looking forward to an exciting slate of games and picks there, and we'll be jumping right in with Thursday Night Football. Gives a reason to watch, perhaps, a game that's the much heralded Bailey Zappi, Mitch Trubisky game.
That's why I had to pick it. There's something that I have to have vested interest in. Exactly.
All right, well, moving over to trivia, we just had the Major League Baseball draft lottery in which the Cleveland Guardians lucked their way into the number 1 overall pick. Kamen, there are 7 franchises in Major League Baseball that have never held the number 1 pick. Can you name them?
Yankees?
The Yankees, nope, they are not one of the 7 teams.
Cardinals?
The Cardinals, correct.
The Dodgers?
Correct.
The Giants?
Yep.
The Mets?
Nope, Mets are not on this list.
So let's see. I have 3 so far.
4 more to go.
4 more to go. The Cubs.
The Cubs have had the number 1 overall pick before.
Okay, I think they had number 2 when they got Mark Pryor.
And also Chris Bryant, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so not the Cubs then.
Nope.
So I said Dodgers, Cardinals.
And Giants.
Giants and Yankees. Yankees was not right. I'm thinking
correct?
of good franchises that have been really good since the draft. The Red Sox.
The Red Sox are on the list. They have not held the number one overall pick.
Okay, Red Sox. Braves.
Nope. Braves had Chipper Jones.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, dumb
Hmm.
question. So definitely not Seattle because they had Griffey.
Yep.
So three more that I need.
Hmm.
The Rangers.
Not the Rangers. I forget who their number one pick was, but they've had the number one pick before.
Okay. Well, let's go with young franchises. Maybe not around as long. The Diamondbacks.
Diamondbacks have had the number one pick, but that's a good place to be looking.
Marlins.
No.
Okay, so a good place. Some younger franchises. Oh, Nationals.
So the Nationals have. The Expos didn't, but they're still same franchise. So the Nationals, they had,
Oh yeah,
I believe, Harper and Strasburg. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because I was thinking the same thing. Bryce Harper.
Mhm. But still, there's one young team, kind of one middle age team, and then one really old team.
Padres.
Mm-mm.
That was my middle age. Okay, so young team right now in the MLB. Why am I blanking? Oh, the Angels.
Not Angels. They had, I forget who they, one of their number one overall picks.
Why can't I think of a young team? I'll give you the old school. No, that's not it. Then that wouldn't be them. Although they used to be good back in the day.
So I'm trying to think of like, I mean, I could just tell you divisions, but obviously that narrows it down
Yeah,
considerably. I
no,
would say, so without giving away American or National League, there is one East, one Central, one West. Two of them have won a World Series. One of them,
Astros.
not Astros.
Okay. Well, process of elimination. The Rockies.
The Rockies, yes, the Rockies. They were founded in, I think it was '98, give or take, something like that. Or no, earlier in the '90s, but relatively new franchise. It's never held the number one
The
overall
Blue
pick.
Jays.
The Blue Jays are on the list. You got one team left. It's a really old team, one of the oldest in baseball.
Orioles.
Nope.
Oldest in baseball. I already said the Yankees. Do I dare say the White Sox, Tom?
Nope. White Sox have had the number one overall pick.
Okay, old team. What old team have I not mentioned? I think I've mentioned all the old teams. The Brewers.
Not the Brewers.
Okay. Braves. I said Cubs. Oh, Phillies.
Not Phillies. This old team is tied infamously to the Chicago White Sox, although perhaps in that year the White Sox were nicknamed a different name.
So it's whoever they threw the series against.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a National League team then.
Yep.
Why am I blanking on who? I mean, it's not the Pirates because they're always bad. Is it the Pirates?
Not the Pirates.
No. So it's a National League. Who have I not mentioned? Did I say the Reds?
You have not said the Reds. That
The
is
Reds.
the last team.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, 7 teams, 7 franchises in the 58-year history
And not
of
the
Major League Baseball.
Yankees. How about that?
No. Yankees have had the number one pick. The for like anti-tanking measures, this is, I believe, the second year that Major League Baseball has held a lottery for their picks. But yeah, 7 teams have done just well enough to never have that distinction of being the worst team in baseball. Kamen, what do you have for trivia, if anything?
Yes. What is the most receiving yards in a national college football semifinal game? How many yards? Who did it? What team?
Was that one of the Jackson Smith and Jigba games?
No, because that was not a CFP game. That was a Rose Bowl game. Ohio State did not make the CFP.
Gotcha.
He had more than 300 yards against Utah. Not Jackson Smith and Jigba. So obviously this is the CFP era.
Yeah.
This is recent, since 2014, I think.
I'm not super great with the college trivia, so I got to go with like super obvious ones, like Devontae Smith, maybe his Heisman season.
Not Devontae Smith.
Okay, I'll go ahead and ask, is this guy currently in the NFL?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so it tells me it's a
Oh
good
yeah.
player. I don't think it would be maybe Chris Olave
Not Chris Olave.
from Ohio State, not him. Maybe T. Higgins was Clemson. So did he and Trevor Lawrence team up, or he and Deshaun Watson? No.
I mean, they probably
Hunter,
did, but not
Hunter
not
Renfro.
not Hunter Renfro,
Jamar Chase, LSU.
not Jamar Chase, but
But warmer. Would it be Justin Jefferson then?
Justin Jefferson. So Chase actually was a better statistical player in college, although they were both amazing. Justin Jefferson against Oklahoma, Tom, 227 yards, 14 catches, 4 touchdowns. Pretty good
God,
day.
that's a pretty solid
that was like the
tandem.
7 touchdown passing game for Burrow in the CFP
Yeah,
semi. Yeah,
yeah, that's a strong it's a strong list right there.
yeah. No
All
doubt.
right, statements of the week. So I know we talked about this pre-show meeting, but actually, your lamentation about your fantasy football team actually sparked a different statement, completely out of whole cloth. So this is something I've come up in with the last couple few minutes here.
What did you say? Lamentation of my injuries. You want to talk
Yeah,
about the NFL quarterback injuries? I know you, Tom.
absolutely. Yeah, because
Okay.
it's a huge crisis. It's a massive crisis. We've seen the NFL
Mhm.
institute all sorts of different rules. You can't hit them between like the knee and the ankle. You can't go low because we had Tom Brady suffering an injury that took him out for an entire season. You can't go high. You can't land on them with your full body weight. You have to, if possible, stop your momentum in midair and not tackle the quarterback too hard. And we still this is probably the second year in a row that we've seen a huge amount of quarterback injuries, and there's no real fix for it. But the thing that is really driving me up a wall is how, with the most important valued position in the NFL, perhaps in all of team sports, how are coaches so bad at developing quarterback talent? I mean, we look at running backs, relatively interchangeable. You look all up and down offensive line, defensive lines, all over the field, you can find somewhat suitable replacements, possibly probably magnified by the fact that the quarterback literally touches the ball just about every single play on offense. But how are we ending up in a spot where there's Tommy DeVitos and there's Tim
DeVito.
Boyles and aged Joe Flacco's? Like, how are we not in
Mitch,
a spot?
Mitch, Mitch, Mitch,
Mitch Trubisky.
which is
Well,
probably
I
one
would
of the
say Mitch
better ones
Trubisky. Yeah,
for a
he's one of the
backup.
better ones. So he falls into the list there. But how are we in a spot where there's such a dearth of talent, such a lack of NFL viable starting quarterback talent, and not even necessarily starting quarterback, but just can come in and get a job done and run it somewhat efficiently. Like, I don't know what the fix is. I mean, I would initially say more practice time, more off-season activities, but the NFLPA, and I think pretty rightfully so, has worked really hard in collective bargaining agreements to get more veteran days off to kind of limit that off-season exposure to let bodies rest and heal up for the season. But I don't know what the answer is to fixing the quarterback problem as far as a guy goes down and there's not a suitable backup quarterback waiting in the wings. There's not somebody who's, talented. I mean, look at what happened to the Rams. Matthew Stafford out. I think it was Brett Rippon was the guy that they had come in, and he turtled the entire game. He spent the entire game pretty much just, please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me. And there was
Right.
virtually no movement of the offense up and down the field. Um, I wonder, like, maybe if there's like a market inefficiency to exploit here, where teams can say, "Hey, so long as we have maybe instead of going for like the superstar quarterback because there's so few of them, let's just go for say a couple of solid veteran options. For example, like let's just have like Jacoby Brissett and Mitchell Trubisky and maybe like a couple of just like mid-tier guys and just build up the rest of the team. Maybe that's like a new way to go, almost retroing back to a time in the NFL where you could win a Super Bowl with a Trent Dilfer or a Brad Johnson. I
You
don't know
can't
what
really
the
do that
answer
anymore.
is. Well, I feel like teams haven't really tried though. I think teams try so hard to go for the big superstar quarterback model and investing so heavily there.
Well, maybe
That
the Niners are the example. Seventh round pick is playing for him. They're not
that
invested heavily
that's
on him.
right, and they were able to develop and have him be a good option available once. I think that year was Trey Lance, followed by Jimmy Garoppolo, leading up to Brock Purdy. And then, I mean, by that point, at Josh Johnson, it's pretty much, we understand San Francisco why you weren't able to win that game. But it's a huge problem that there really doesn't seem to be an easy
Yeah, but like San
solution.
Francisco had good ones though. But you
That's
know,
one team.
yeah, no, I
Like
agree.
how many other teams have a backup coming in and that there isn't a significant drop off? Like maybe the Falcons, but that's because the delta between
Well, their
Desmond Ritter and
starters are
Taylor
terrible.
Heineke like isn't that big. I mean, there's probably not a huge giant drop off from say Kenny Pickett to Mitch Trubisky, but it just feels like
Or the Giants, but they're just all bad.
there's just not enough like decent quarterbacking to go around, and I don't know how the NFL fixes a problem that leads us to having games like we're going to have on Thursday Night Football between Bailey Zappi and Mitchell Trubisky as starting quarterbacks. I just don't know how the NFL gets these guys better, how these teams can better prepare or better invest in the quarterback position, because it seems like a huge issue that really hasn't been fixed for the most important position. So
It's kind of interesting because I'd argue that we have more good starting quarterbacks than ever. Like there's probably about 20 at least really good starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So I'd argue that we have more depth as far as the starters than ever. But yeah, as far as the backups, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I can
yeah,
tell you why the injuries are so prevalent, Tom. I think it's the great defensive line play we see. This
mm,
season we've seen the defense is actually stepping up. We were talking about points the last few years. The points are down this year, and it's primarily because of these elite pass rushers we're seeing. So these quarterbacks are taking all this extra pressure, these extra hits that maybe don't even really get registered in the sack department always because they're able to get rid of the
mm,
ball. Like I think, some of these injuries, the quarterbacks actually didn't even take a sack and they got hurt. But I think it's all the elite defensive line play that, I mean, yeah, you take more hits from bigger, more ferocious, more athletic athletes than ever, you get more injuries, and you can put in all the rules you want, but that's just, for me, I think the freakish nature of the defensive line is why we see
mm.
so many of them personally. But hate to see it. I would like to see more good backups, but then again, you would argue though, what if you had a really good backup? Would he be quite good enough to win you a Super Bowl? Probably not. So then I know it sounds
Depends on how good
terrible,
the rest of
Tom.
the team is.
Yeah, but depends on, like, do you put all your money on your guy? Do you build your team around that guy and just hope that he's healthy? Because I'd argue, even historically, I know
Hmm.
Trent Dilfer is an extreme case. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but the history of the NFL, a lot of the Super Bowl winning teams have had a really good quarterback. I mean, there's
I
examples, of course,
I
but
mean, I
like,
think that the modern example would be Carson Wentz goes down, and you have a really qualified backup in Nick Foles, like multi-year starter in the wings. But
yeah,
because the rest of the team around him was so good,
but that's such a rare example, though, Tom.
well, but
Such a
I'm
rare
saying like
example.
they're like
Like, can you think of
how
another
is
guy that has done that, like a backup to win you the Super Bowl? Because I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean,
well, I
I mean,
mean, with
Tom
Tom Brady
Brady,
taking, yeah,
but
like yeah,
yeah,
but
but like
still, like
he was a 6th round pick. They weren't billing him as a really good backup. They
right,
just
no,
got
like that's
fortunate.
it's definitely rare, but I wonder if the solution might be build up the rest of the team so that to a lesser extent of a Brock Purdy, you can put in a viable NFL quarterback and still be able to succeed. Like, I wonder if that just might be the way that teams end up going because we're looking at, like, I mean, like luck's a big factor of it too, in terms of, if your quarterback's injured, your season might kind of sort of be done. I mean, the Ravens were competitive with Tyler Huntley. I mean, not to a Super Bowl level, but like just there has to be some sort of solution to at least keep teams viable, keep them competitive later on in the season, so that there's at least some better football to be played. I mean, I'm not saying that these teams are necessarily going to win Super Bowls, but there shouldn't be a reason why the quarterback play from backups is so much worse to the point that it's borderline unwatchable at this level.
Fair. I got a couple things I want to hit on my statement of the week. First off, just a real quick one. I know we didn't talk about it. A lot of big football stuff to get through, but I am enjoying the NBA play-in tournament. Sometimes the courts are a little much, but overall, I like the different looking courts. I think it's given, you look at the players that have commented on it. Even Kevin Durant in a loss said that I didn't like this originally, but it felt like a playoff game. This is really, really cool. Also, the money won in this tournament is split evenly among the players. I think it's like 550,000 a player or something. So the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guy on the bench, some of those guys, that could be half their salary for the year if you're the last guy on the bench that you would just get by winning this tournament. So it's created for a lot of fun competition, had some really good games. My pick to win it is the Bucks. I'm looking at the Bucks. Lakers are my semifinal winners. Bucks over the Lakers in the in-season tournament. Does get you that playoff feel, does get you that playoff setting. It's really good for example, Giannis and Dame to have that chemistry in a must-win game scenario. I'm not saying it's quite the NBA playoffs, but I do like the play-in tournament. Secondly, I want to hit on this as far as the college football scheduling these teams do. I did mention it a little bit earlier in the show, but I'm going to hit on it a little bit more, make it a little bit stronger statement. I think college football needs to schedule these big non-conference matchups late in the year. So we're not sitting here talking about a Florida State LSU game week 1, an Alabama and Texas game week 2. We've seen this in the NFL. They don't even have preseason in college, by the way. So their, simulation of game speed is so much different. So I want to see these elite games happen late in the season so we can really, truly look at the non-conference schedule, not sit here and talk about like this matchup was so different week 1 versus week 2. These teams are so much better 10 weeks later. Let's see the Texas State and Alabama play late in the season instead of early on, Tom. That's what I would love to see.
I mean, I agree with you. My only small counter or quibble is what does that do to the early season schedule? Because a lot of times those big profile non-conference games are wicked eyeballs. If we're watching Alabama and the Little Sisters of the Poor in September type of thing, not too many people are going to be that invested. So, for moving things around, would you consider moving up non-conference play? Would you consider?
There you go. And maybe sandwich in the cupcake games where not everyone has the cupcake game every week. I know that gets really, really messy, but there's probably ways to figure around that. So that's my take. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, ideally the answer would be just everybody schedule more non-conference games or what have you. And actually, I mean, the one good thing that could come out of the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams is that in order to be an at-large bid, we kind of get a little bit more into college basketball where you need to schedule a little bit more earlier on in the season. But yeah, I mean, the games are so precious and they're so few at the college football
because college
level.
Basketball, you could lose one or win one. And yes, everyone matters, but there's more of them. Whereas college football, one game could decide your season. So
yeah.
I don't have the exact solution, but if people sat down and really delved into it, they could probably come up with it. So, all right, well, cool,
Tom.
Tom.
Just develop a set criterion that's actually objective and not subjective. But whatever.
You're never going to perfect that, though, Tom. It's never going to be perfect.
Or just not care about having a national champion in college football.
I mean, that's no fun, Tom. That's no fun. That was your debate. My guy Radar here, the recent 14-year-old birthday boy.
Oh, happy birthday, Radar.
Yeah, last week he's ready, or maybe 2 weeks ago. Whatever day I told you it was.
Yeah.
No, that was
That was last week. Yeah.
That was last week. So I think it was actually last week to this day, actually. So a week ago exactly. I think he's ready to go outside. So I'll go let him out, but it's
Me too.
a good starting point, Tom. Such a great show as always. Thank you so much for co-hosting with me. Thank you to the listeners, the viewers. You guys are great. We'll see you next week with plenty more sports talk right here at Salute Your Sports.